This is what happened when I flew my paraglider 202 kilometres from Worcestershire Beacon on the Malvern Hills to Hawkedon in Suffolk. It was Monday the 7th of August 2023. I set off from home walking up the hill at 10:24 and half an hour later I was on the top of the beacon. There were quite a few paragliders getting ready to fly. I was greeted by a couple of people I knew, and one of them congratulated me on my long-distance flight in June and shook my hand. We discussed the day's weather, and I said that the thermals were predicted to be strong from 11 o'clock, and with the fairly strong wind, I thought there would be a good chance to go as far as Milton Keynes or Cambridge. I have started using the Android app called XCGuide. It shows me all the information I need and logs my flight to Live Track 24 so others can see me and my wife can check that I'm okay. By the time I was ready to launch, there were a few other people flying. I launched among the others and found thermals in front of the hill. I climbed with them and was drifted downwind. There was now no way back to the launch. When the climb had ended and I set off gliding downwind, I put my gloves on. It gets cold up high, but I have my jumper and coat on. I have a thin balaclava to keep the sun and cold wind off most of my face, and I put my feet into a fabric pod which keeps them warm. When I've been too successful climbing, I have to leave the thermal so as not to go into the cloud.
No, cloud base. Not supposed to do that. Okay. Downwind.
I had only flown as far as Lower Quinton in a westerly before, 42 kilometres away, despite having had a few much longer flights in an easterly wind. Today was looking like a good day to beat that distance. There was a fair amount of wind, so it didn't take long to make it over the River Severn. I was pretty much keeping up with the other paragliders, but before long many of the faster paragliders ahead of me were leaving me behind. My paraglider is not as fast as many of these that I was flying next. We crossed the M5 and I was flying alongside a black and white paraglider. For the first half of the flight I would catch sight of the paragliders at the front, but they became smaller as the flight went on. I flew over Evesham. I was on my own by now. I flew over HMP Long Lartin and thought about the meaning of freedom. I was joined by a light blue and pink paraglider as I thermaled up to the clouds. I came out of the cloud over Meon Vale. The height I had allowed me to catch up with a yellow paraglider with a blue submarine-shaped harness. There were some other paragliders here too. I flew onwards over the Vale of the Red Horse. On a glide, I found my wife.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Yeah, I'm flying and having a good time.
I flew over the M40. I climbed up high and came out of cloud over the route of HS2 at Chipping Warden. I got some good views of it. I get a chance to have a snack when I'm on a glide. I brought along some peanuts and raisins. It passes the time, unzipping my flight deck, getting them out, removing the lid, eating them, putting the lid back on. I was in the air for over 5 hours, and occasionally I noticed that there's nothing much needing doing. XCGuide was showing me all the airspace and telling me how far above me the air corridors were. At one point it was only about 20 metres above me. I glided straight over Toaster. I got quite low near the village of Stoke Bruern, where I found a thermal. It became the most turbulent thermal I've been in the UK. It was quite scary and I didn't know what was going to happen to my paraglider.
Oh, yes.
I got a deflation. It was worth it though, as it turned into the strongest climb of the day and got me up nice and high again. I found myself over the M1 near Northampton.
God, that scared me. I enjoyed it. idea where I am. Well, I have a map. That's Northampton, and that's Milton Keynes.
XCGuide showed me various red airspaces which I'm not allowed into. It also showed me orange ones which I am allowed through but should keep an eye out. There was an area at Olney which I went round. I can't see it on the map anywhere now to put it in the video.
I don't know where I'm going.
I get a bit stressed when I'm low, trying to guess where the next thermal might be. There was airspace at Twinwoods that was definitely red, so I had to go round it. Apparently it used to be an RAF station, but has recently been used for drone delivery experiments. My fingers can start getting cold if I hold my hands up high all the time, so I take the chance to hold them lower when I'm gliding.
No idea.
I was still quite high, but already wanting another thermal and thinking there might have been one over the city. I did get a climb, as usual, but got fairly low over a village called Potton. I was joined by a blue paraglider for a while. I glided towards Wimpole Estate, which has an impressive ornamental avenue.
Oh, come on, where are you?
I'm constantly wanting to get higher.
Is that it? Come on, it's only 3:34.
I was on my way down over Great Shelford. I got really quite low and struggled with a small area of light lift. I eventually got an okay climb. A big plane flew past. I got to a point where I was sure I wouldn't be able to carry on much longer. One of the secrets of doing a longer cross-country paragliding flight is to not think at all about how you're going to get home until you've landed, so I was still thinking about finding lift. But eventually I had to accept that I was landing. This point coincided nicely with a large open stubble field, a perfect place for a landing in what was quite strong wind for a paraglider. As I got close to the ground, the wind decreased because it was slowed by the ground, causing me to swoop down a bit. But the landing was perfect and gentle. As I collapsed the paraglider, I ran towards it to take its energy away. I had flown 202 kilometres, a personal distance record. Now, how to get home? I was right by a village called Hawkedon. I asked Google Maps how to get home by public transport. It suggested driving a car 4 miles north to a bus stop in Chedburgh, then getting the 5:49 bus to Bury St Edmunds, then getting the 6:25 train. This would be the last train that would be able to get me home before the morning. I set off walking. I asked a man who was mowing his lawn for advice. He was friendly, but not very helpful. I phoned my wife to discuss my options as I walked. I was hoping to hitch a lift to the bus or train. It was already 5:10, and I couldn't walk to the bus in time to catch it. I phoned all the taxi companies in Bury St Edmunds, but they couldn't come out to me in time, or didn't answer. By 5:49, I knew I had missed the bus, and was still 1.5 miles from the bus stop. About 10 cars and vans had passed me with my thumb out. It was a quiet road. I was on the phone to my wife again, discussing where I would sleep tonight, when a passing van stopped for me. I was surprised that it was a young African woman delivery driver. She went out of her way and took me to the train station and didn't want any money. I gave her £10 anyway. She was like an angel sent to rescue me. The trains all worked pretty much on time, and I got into Malvern Link at 11:13. I had had to spend almost £100 on train tickets, but was delighted to be home again. I was really chuffed with my flight. I hadn't thought I would be flying over 200 kilometres any time soon.